Hi, and welcome to Tim's Corner. Thanks for watching today. If you're into content like this, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for further updates. I'm building a diorama for my 124 scale car collection, and to start off, all I'm doing here is taking a piece of scrap plywood and squaring it off. And now the plywood's ready to go, putting on a layer of paint here to adhere the flock to. I'm only doing half of the board to start just because it's latex and it dries pretty quickly. So here I'm using a Woodland Scenics, I believe it's medium green, maybe it might be burnt turf, fine grass flock, and I'm just measuring here with my car to make sure that the road is going to be the right size. And for the road itself, I'm actually using an HO scale ballast. I found that's about the right size for a 124 scale automobile, so that's what I'm using there for the road. I'm not going in any specific order with what I'm putting on here. There's not a lot of depth, not a lot of layering, so I'm not going crazy over orders of putting on grass versus gravel versus multiple layers of things, because it's not a very detailed diorama. It's pretty simple. So this is actually static grass flock, though. I will mention that adds a little bit of detail that might be interesting. I'm not actually going to make it static grass. I just found that it adds a nice layer of those random long pieces of grass that are kind of hanging out in any lawn or field or anything like that you might find, and are drooped over. So anyway, I sprayed it all down with some wet water, and now you can tell I'm putting on the glue. This is I believe it's a 3-to-1 mix I'm using. Once that is set, it's starting to dry, and I move on to the fence. So what I'm doing here is just cutting some popsicle sticks, cutting the ends off, and I kind of carve the edges. You'll see, not here, but at the end of the video, it's kind of carved, and it makes it look a little more rustic. And once I have those, that's what you'll have, is a bunch of fence rails. And here are some skewers. And what I'm going to do here is, as I mentioned also on the rails, I'm going to carve these a little bit, and that'll just make them look a little more weathered, a little more used, which is what I'm going for. And here I'm cutting the length of the post, and I'm using a matchstick as a guide. It's about the right size. So here I have all my fence posts, I have all my other rails as well, and all I do here is stick them in some stain to weather them. You can do this any way you want, of course, paint works, washing them, putting a wash on them, things like that. But again, this diorama is not going into terrible depth, so I'm gonna go ahead. I have this old can of stain I'm not gonna use anymore. I believe it's a Jacobean stain, so it's a darker stain. I dip it in, put it out onto a towel, stain. If you don't kind of dab it up, it doesn't soak into the wood completely, and it won't dry. So I highly recommend doing that. So that's the finished color, I guess you could say, and this is just the final installation of the fence itself. I start out with the posts, of course, because you need posts to put rails on. And again, this is kind of a rustic look I'm going for. It's not a perfect precision fence that was professionally installed. I'm kind of thinking this was a farmer who came out here 100 years ago and put up a fence by the road where his horse and buggy used to go. So I'm kind of going along those lines. So if they kind of fall a little to the left or the right as they're drying, I'm okay with that. I'm just gluing them on with some tacky glue. And since this is a wood-to-wood application here for the fence rail to the fence post, I'm using wood glue. So you can tell I'm just kind of slowly, it doesn't take a terribly long time, but you do have to be patient, gluing the rails onto the fence posts themselves. And as you can tell, you can probably notice the edge of the fence rails, they're not perfect. That's what I was talking about earlier in the video, where I kind of carved them out a little bit to make them look a little more worn. I only did every other section, and you'll see why in a second. It's so I can put the rails, I can step the next set of rails up on top of these sets of rails that I already have. It'll make a lot more sense here, as you see. They can just set that fence rail right on top, and that's kind of where it's set to dry. That's the easiest way I could figure out how to do essentially a butt joint. It's not really a butt joint, of course, but it makes it so the fence can be continuous. And here's my 100-year-old fence, right behind a perfectly clean and groomed gravel road. That is not realistic, but I wish a gravel road would look like that, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it there. The tree here I made in a separate video, which I will put a link for in the description, and to attach it to the diorama, as well as 2 other trees that I'll be putting on. I'm just drilling holes and putting a dab of glue on, and that of course will just hold it to the diorama securely. I like to usually put trees in odd-numbered clumps, 1, 3, 5, because it looks a little more natural. But I, of course, break my own rule in this video. In the back, you'll see I only put 2 together. I just figured for this size of the diorama, and since there was one in the foreground, it kind of looked okay. So I just went for it and kept it, rather than making any crazy alterations. Oh no. Silly Tim forgot to paint the side of the diorama before putting on the scenery. It's not really a right or wrong thing, but if you're trying to avoid painting your scenery, I would have recommended to myself, Tim, maybe you should paint the sides first. Oh well, it's not really a right or a wrong thing, and I still think it came out pretty well in the end, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave a few pictures up here for you with one of my first model cars. And I think it came out with some pretty cool shots. Feel free to, again, like and subscribe if you like stuff like this, and leave any comments below with any suggestions, comments, anything you might have for me. Thanks again for watching.